Hi, this is Tom Rush with John Broughton on Retrospectives on 3SER KC Radio.
There's no regrets, no tears goodbye.
Well, firstly, congratulations. Your first record your first studio record in 35 years. One can't accuse you of trying to flood the market with your product.
No, I like to take my time and think these things through. I don't like to dash headlong into things.
Was there something that clicked within you that prompted you to decide, well, now's the time to get another record out there?
You know, basically, I think I'd just run out of excuses, and Jim Musselman from Appleseed called me up. And it's a project I've been thinking about for all of the 35 years, and I've made, in fact, several false starts, going in the studio and making demos, and trying to figure out what to do with the music. And Musselman called me up and said, "Hey, let's make a CD." So I did.
Uh-huh.
And it was quite painless, even fun. I went down to Nashville and worked with Jim Rooney, who's an old friend from back in my early days, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm really very pleased with the results.
I think I read somewhere that your initial plans were to try and get this record out on a major label. Is that right?
Well, yes, back a decade or so ago, I thought that really a major label. I like the songs well enough that I didn't want to put it out on my own label. I don't really. I put out a couple of live recordings on my own, but I don't really put them out. I manufacture some, and I take them to shows, and I sell them at tomrush.com, and that's all I do. I don't send them to reviewers. I don't send them to radio stations. They don't exist unless you come to one of my shows, or if you're on my mailing list, my email list. You know about them, but otherwise, they don't exist. And I thought these songs deserve more of a life than that. So I wanted to get them out there. But it became apparent, especially recently, that being on a major label is like trying to get on board the Titanic. You don't really want to do that. And so I wasn't quite sure what to do. I still didn't want to put it out myself. And Jim Musselman solved my dilemma by leaping into the breach and volunteering to put it out for me. And I researched him, and he's put out projects by Tom Paxton and Pete Seeger and David Bromberg, and I called my buddies and asked how they liked him, and everybody thought he was terrific. So here we are.
Fantastic. So will this be an ongoing relationship with Appleseed?
We'll see what happens next. I don't know if he's going to be interested in whatever my next project is, but I think he's done a good job so far, and I have no idea how it's selling. I haven't seen a single bit of. I know I'm selling a lot of them at shows and at the website, but I have no idea how it's doing out in the world. But I do know it's gotten a lot of very nice, very supportive press and quite a bit of airplay. So the signs are good.
It's all good, yeah. Was it a strange feeling getting back into the studio again? Did you have to re-acclimatise to a studio environment?
Well, it was actually a very different studio experience than what I remember from the 70s. I have been in studios since then. I recorded. Sony Records put out a retrospective and wanted to do one new song, and so I went in with John Leventhal in New York and recorded one song on old equipment. Though this was on old analog equipment. There's a studio in New York that specializes in antique sound gear.
Oh, wow.
And it was basically the same studio that I'd walked out of in 1975. With the paint was a little more chipped, and the knobs were falling off. But other than that, it was an old analog studio. In Nashville, it was all digital, and I must say, makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
in the old model, when you wanted to remix a tune, you want to boost the bass a little bit at the beginning of the third chorus. You had to remix the entire tune manually. All those knobs had to be manipulated by hand as the tape played, and you'd get the bass boosted in the third verse, but something else might get changed that you didn't want. And it was a very labor-intensive process, and it involved listening to the stuff thousands of times as it got mixed and remixed. Now with the digital stuff, you just go straight to the third verse, you boost the bass, you're done.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier.
So when you go 35 years without putting out a studio record, how do you go about a song selection process?
Well, it was kind of a collaborative process between Mr. Rooney and myself. And we were emailing songs back and forth. I provided most of them because I've had 35 years to collect them. And some of them, in fact, I've been doing on stage for a while, but I just have not gotten around to recording them. So I sent him, too many songs, and he indicated which ones he was enthusiastic about. And he sent me some songs, and I liked some of them very much, and some of them not at all. And so, it went back and forth. And we ended up with 15 songs, which I assumed, using the old model, I figured that you go in with 15 and, 3 of them are going to fall by the wayside, and you'll end up with a dozen. But in fact, Rooney's so good, and the players in Nashville are so good, and the engineer, that none of them died on the table. And so we've got 15 songs that I really like on this album.
And 6 new songs of yours, and I guess after such a long break away from the recording studio, and only 6 songs on this album, you wouldn't label yourself a prolific writer. Do you wish sometimes that you were more prolific?
Well, I wish I was more disciplined, because if I could actually show up for work on a daily basis and sit down and stare at the guitar for a couple of hours, I would write. I would have a lot more songs. But it's hard work, and it's discouraging work, and I will avoid it whenever possible. Sometimes there's a song that just won't shut up. It won't leave me alone, and I have to put in the time and finish it up.
Now, this being the first studio release of yours in the CD era, did you pay a lot of attention to the sequencing of the songs on the record? With these days, people can program them any way they like. Well, that's a good question. It used to be one of the most laborious parts of making an LP was figuring out the sequence. Because I don't know how many millions of ways there are to sequence 12 songs, but it's a lot. And now, as you say, it's irrelevant because people are going to put them on their iPod and shuffle them. But Rooney came up with a sequence, and I then spent about a week shuffling little scraps of paper on the table top, trying to figure out a better sequence. And I finally threw up my hands and said, I'll go with Rooney. You wrote in the liner notes that you surprised yourself in that you actually enjoy listening to this record. Have you been a harsh judge of yourself in the past?
Oh, always. I think I say in the liner notes that being an English lit major does not make things easier, because you've read the greats, and so anything that you write is compared to a pretty high standard, and so I'm and the same with recordings, having listened to the greats. So I'm pleasantly surprised to find that I actually enjoy listening to this. It's partly because I didn't have to listen to it so many times in the production process.
Yeah. Looking at some of the guests on the record, you have Bonnie Bramlett on the opening track. I believe it's been many, many years since you've seen Bonnie.
Yes, I last saw Bonnie on the train tour across southern Canada that was celebrated in the Festival Express movie. It's a train filled with Janis Joplin and the Grateful Dead and the band and Delaney and Bonnie and Hot Tuna and Mountain and Ian and Sylvia and on and on and on. It was a great party.
And she's still sounding great.
And she still sounds good. She still sounds great. I shouldn't say good. Great. Yep. She's very much alive.
You have a cover of a Jack Tempchin song, East of Eden, on the album.
Yeah.
I believe many years ago you had first access to another one of his songs and didn't take it up.
Yeah, he came and pitched Already Standing to me, which the Eagles then went and had a big hit with. A Peaceful, Easy Feeling.
Ah, yes.
And he pitched it to me, and I passed on it, and the Eagles made a big hit out of it, which, is not to say that I would have had a big hit had I done it. I think the way they did it was exquisite, and I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have done it some other way. But he's a great writer, and I actually just got an email from him yesterday saying that he loves the album, and my song, the River Song, is his new favorite tune, and he's just sent it to Glenn Fry of the Eagles, and so he's pitching my songs for me now.
That's terrific. He's a very underappreciated songwriter too.
Yeah, he does good stuff. Very, very good stuff.
You have Emmylou Harris harmonising with you on a track. Was that a specific role you had earmarked for Emmylou? Or did that just fall into place?
I just said, I told Jim that, as long as we're in Nashville and so many of my old buddies live here, let's see who we can get to come in. But I said I don't want anybody, I don't want to have anybody on the project just because they're famous, and they have to be the right person for the job. And Jim matched her up with that particular song. And I think it was a good call.
Most definitely. Was there a major influencing factor in wanting to record the record in Nashville?
Not really. It was mainly that Jim, I wanted to work with Jim, and Jim, that's where he does his recording. And he has this list of A-list musicians who he calls Rooney's Irregulars. He doesn't live there anymore, but he keeps a band together, in theory at least, and once a year they get together and do a show. It's Rooney's Irregulars, and it's some of the best studio players on the planet. And so it was terrific to be able to work with some of these people. A real privilege.
And as you said, Jim is an old friend of yours. It must have been a great help and a comfort to have a long-time associate such as Jim behind you with the project.
Well, yeah, it's it made it sort of feel familiar, but mainly I wanted him involved because he's so good, and he's so good because he doesn't go for cosmetic perfection. He goes for the feel, and he knows when he's got it, and he will say, "Okay, we got that one. Let's go on to the next." And a lot of these were first takes, and he just felt that it felt right. There's no point in doing it anymore.
Exactly.
And I would always insist on doing one or two more just because I couldn't believe that it was that easy. But he was inevitably right. Well, there was actually one time when the take that I insisted on actually worked out better. But for the most part, he was absolutely correct.
He was right, yeah. You got a chance to show off your whistling skills on the title track. Tell us about the track, What I Know. I believe it was something of a Valentine's Day gift.
It was. I was on the road for Valentine's Day, and I wrote this. I wrote it for my bride. It probably would have gone over better if I hadn't emailed it to her, but it's the only delivery system that would get it there on time, since I finished it on the night before Valentine's. And it's a fun song. It kind of reminds me of it sort of has a retro feel. It reminds me of my cousin Bo, who was the fellow who first got me really interested in music as a source of fun. And he played the ukulele and played a lot of songs like Katie and My Father's Whiskers and Abdul Bulbul Amir and tunes like that. And this kind of reminds me of him. It feels, it has kind of a retro feel to it.
You also recorded a version of Casey Jones on the record, a character many of us down here would assume was a fictional one, but he was very, very real. Tell us about that.
Oh, he was a real guy, which is part of what intrigues me about the song. As with all folk songs, there are 1,000 different variations out there. But he was a real guy. His name was, I think, John Luther Jones. But he came from KC, Kentucky, so they nicknamed him KC. And he became an engineer and drove the Cannonball Express and drove it too fast, apparently. Killed himself. And at that same time, there was a ballad out there called the Ballad of Jimmy Jones that had a lot of scatological verses about women and liquor and all sorts of things. And some clever fellow figured he would just change Jimmy Jones to Casey Jones and put in a couple of verses about the train wreck. And it was a very hurtful thing for the Jones family to hear all these songs about how, lines like "Hush up, children, stop your crying, you got another papa on the Salt Lake line," and all about how Casey was a drinker and a gambler and a womanizer. So I like this version of the song because it sticks up for Casey and for his family. Everybody's good, and he drove his train too fast.
Now, some of the songwriters featured on the album are not household names, continuing your tradition of finding great songs by some great unrecognised writers. Tell us about A.J. Swearingen, who wrote "You're Not Here With Me."
He's an interesting fella. He's young, good-looking, plays guitar great, writes wonderful songs, and has a terrific voice. Basically, I hate him. But he writes some terrific songs, and nobody's much heard of him. He's got a website. I recommend him, A.J. Swearingen. And check him out. He's got a bunch of songs that are really, really good. I expect I may well do some more of his tunes. He opened shows for me a couple of times in Pennsylvania, someplace in Pennsylvania, and I got to know him. And I don't usually get to hear the opening act because I'm backstage tuning up and getting ready to go on. But I heard all this tumultuous applause and felt that I'd better go peek behind the curtain and see what was going on. And he's very, very good.
Close the album with a wonderful arrangement of Drift Away, an often covered song. How did your arrangement of that one come together?
Well, I've always loved the song, and I happened to meet Mentor Williams at the Nashville airport a few years ago, and he struck me as a serious fellow. He didn't. The song's always been done with big production, horn sections and smoke machines and pole dancers, and a lot of dancing around the stage. And it struck me that maybe when he originally wrote the tune, he didn't have that kind of production in mind. It just, if you listen to the words, it's a very lonely, almost desperate song, somebody hanging by a thread. And so I thought I'd try to do it, boil it, bring it down to just the words and the melody, one guitar, and we put a cello on it just to distance it even further from the original version. And I think it works. I think you can hear the song maybe in a different way than you've heard it before.
Is it tough sometimes taking on a song like that, which, as I said, has been covered so many times in so many different ways, and people probably already have a perception of how it should sound, and trying to put your own twist to it?
Well, it's, on stage, it's the challenge, which I think I've finally figured out, is how to prevent the audience from all singing along on the chorus, which is what you do when Drift Away comes up.
Yeah.
They all form a conga line at the back of the hall and want to dance. But I'm saying, no, just listen to it. Don't participate, which is not like not what a folk singer should be doing. But I think it's in the way you introduce it, and I finally figured out, I think, how to describe the song ahead of time that makes people want to listen and sit back and listen and not wave their arms in the air and sing along.
I know you're still keeping a pretty busy touring schedule. Touring with this record behind you, are you touring solo, or are you actually bring some musicians along with you?
I'm mostly a solo act these days, which I really enjoy. I also have a keyboard player who also plays saxophone and sings harmonies, and we work together occasionally. But mainly I'm a solo act. Most of the shows I'm doing, actually, my shows are booked at least a year out, most of them. And so most of these were booked before I even knew I was going to be making an album. And I haven't added any shows. I've added a good many radio appearances, but no conventional concerts to the existing calendar.
Now, since I last spoke to you, you've made the move from Wyoming to New Hampshire. Any particular inspiration behind that?
Well, there was several, but I come from New Hampshire. I'm a New Hampshire boy, and a lot of my work is in the northeast of the U.S., and so living here, I now get to drive to work instead of having to take airplanes, which has become less and less fun as time has gone by.
Yeah.
And so I'll drive to anything that's 5 hours. A 5-hour drive is easier than flying, I think. And that covers maybe half of the shows I do. I still have to get on airplanes for the rest of them, but it used to be that I had to get on the airplanes for all of them when I was living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Right. So it's a convenience and a homecoming, I guess, of sorts.
Yes, yeah, it feels good to be back home.
So have you got a taste for the recording scene again? Do you think we could be at the beginning of a more prolific recording career for Tom Rush?
Well, I don't think I'll wait another 35 years. I've got a couple of projects in mind. One is to do an album of Woody Guthrie songs, because I think his songs, not only are they great songs, but most of the topics that he wrote about are still completely relevant today, in the U.S. at least. Immigration, rural homelessness, on and on. We haven't solved those problems. They're still with us. And so those songs are current in their content. And I think it would be an interesting thing to do. The other project would be to do a collection of songs that Cousin Bo, who taught me the ukulele, might have done. Abdullah Bulbul Amir and My Father's Whiskers and all those fun songs that got me interested in music in the first place, that nobody's doing anymore. I don't know if I'd take up the ukulele again, but I might.
Tom, it's fantastic to catch up with you again, and congratulations once again on a fantastic record. It's great to have some new studio product from you after so long.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for listening.
We're always listening. We hope maybe one day you can still squeeze in an Australian visit. We'd love to see you down here.
I would love to do it.
Fantastic. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Maybe this new CD will create the spark to get you down here.
Could be.
Could be. You never know. Thanks again for your time, Tom.
Thank you.
All the best. Take care.
Bye-bye.